Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Sutherland. I'm the moderator today. I'm a managing director at Tyton Partners, and we are very excited to talk about the stress around enrollment, but also hopefully a little optimism and actionable insights as well. I am joined by an esteemed panel. To my right, with the orange behind her, Kari Alldredge, University of Tennessee, the Flagship campus, mixing in very well there. Don Hiles, PeopleGrove, David Felsenthal, EAB, and Matt Pellish from College Board. So we're looking to have a conversation that really hopefully leaves all of you with very good takeaways, actionable insights to go back to your campuses. We do recognize that the enrollment pressures that we're looking at, I mean, you know what they are: demographics, student choice, digital marketing costs, affirmative action, you name it, they don't hit all of us equally. And some campuses that are more selective are feeling them differently than some of the more open access campuses. So we will try to kind of cover all of those bases and make this as relevant as we can. So panelists, hello. First thing I want to talk about is probably, to my mind, having been a former enrollment person, your differentiated value propositions of colleges. There is so much noise in the space. There's so much effort to try to create a story that is different than your competitors, and want to talk about how you all, you know, we have three companies, vendors, partners. I feel like vendors is somehow a bad word, it shouldn't be. How are we advising campuses to kind of start out and focus on their value prop, even at the very top of the enrollment effort and thinking funnel? So Kari, want to start with you and what you're seeing in Tennessee.
Wonderful, thank you. A little bit more about UT. We do serve as both the Flagship and the land grant in Tennessee and enroll about 36,000 students across undergrad and graduate programs. I love this question because one of the favorite things that I get to do in my work is define the UT experience. And we know students and families have thousands of options, over 4,000 colleges and universities in the US alone. So why UT? So at every touch point, we really challenge our team to think about differentiation. A few of the things that we've done kind of outside the technology space is creating those experiences. So a few examples: when students are admitted at the university, when I got admitted to college, I got a windowed envelope and a really flat, kind of sad letter. You would have thought it was a bill. And what we've tried to do is transform that experience for our students. So the first thing our admitted students get is a card that plays Rocky Top, which is our kind of fight song, our favorite anthem at the university. We also try to engage all the senses. So for us, that is something, you hear it, you feel it, you touch it, and it becomes a shared experience with our students and families. Some of the other things we try to think about is, what can we learn from other industries and apply to higher ed? So you go to a luxury hotel, they have a scent that is specific to their hotel. You come to our visitor center at UT, we have a scent machine in our visitor center, pumps out citrus, right? Because we're trying to reinforce big orange at every touch point. So we're really excited about where technology is going in terms of AI and how we can leverage that to, again, kind of get to these personalized experiences. But we also never want to lose sight of creating these special experiences for students at every touch point.
And kind of picking up the technology theme, David, you have many client institutions across the spectrum. How do you approach creating a differentiated value proposition?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, I would certainly agree with everything Kari said in terms of the things that they're doing. You know, it is, we work with almost every college and university in the country in some way around their enrollment offerings. And, you know, some of the things that we try and focus on, one is multi-channel marketing. You've got to meet the student where they are, when they're there, with a message that resonates to them. And those messages need to be consistent across all the channels that they're seeing your institution on. We believe in hyper-personalization, which is obviously more possible now with AI, but if you're only relying on AI, then you're going to end up basically sounding like everybody else. How do you make sure you're being more efficient so that you can hyper-personalize while really making your institution come to life? Outside industry best practices, how do we make sure that we're always taking a look at what the Starbucks and the Amazons and other consumer B2C players are doing out there. We found that the half-life of innovation in the marketing world is even shorter than it was before, and so making sure that we're taking those best practices. And then last is making sure we're focused on the parents as well. Our research would show that parents are 40% more influential today in their students' decisions than they even were 4 years ago, and they were highly influential then as well. So making sure you're engaging and nurturing those parents.
Great, thank you. So Don, I want to go to you, and can you tell us a little bit about PeopleGrove, as people wouldn't be as familiar perhaps with you?
Sure. So PeopleGrove is a tech platform that basically runs the span from prospective student all the way to alumni. And much of what David said, you have to sound different. You have to have a different value proposition. And so much of what our company does is help be the value proposition for a campus. So how are you different? And we work with about 650 different universities, and they'll come to us and say, we're really unique because of X, Y, and Z, but we've heard that 649 times. And so if you're a prospective student or you're an existing student, you're hearing the same thing. And we as campus partners, and I've been on a campus, I've been a VP for alumni, VP for advancement, and enrollment, and I thought we were really unique, only to realize everyone sounds like this. So really, it's the importance of using things that are very different, the orange, the big orange. What is it that's very unique and different, and how do you make sure that you can market that at scale? And so that's really what we do, is use technology to market that through one-to-one connections with students or prospective students and alumni to get career support, mentoring, things like that. But those become the value propositions that go into the marketing campaign to make sure that you have the right message going to the right student at the right time.
So you mentioned career support and mentoring as two distinct value propositions. I assume your hypothesis is most schools aren't using those yet.
Certainly not leveraging them. I think a lot of schools say we have a career center, so we've checked that box. And really what students need is a network. They need to be able to go and call 5 people. And the alumni network really is underutilized for this. And what we've seen, though, in our work is that those alums that are getting engaged through mentorship or advising someone on a career path, they're significantly more likely to give. So the average is about 9% giving rate. People that are included in this type of a mentorship give at rates above 50%. So while the goal isn't to generate revenue, it's very much the byproduct of getting that right message to the right student at the right time and connecting them with the right alumni as well.
Thank you. Matt, I'm not going to forget about you. I'm just going to put you on the next question, all right? So we should and need to touch on affirmative action and the impact that ruling has had on institutions. What can schools do, from your perspective at College Board, Matt, to get to that diversified student body that everyone wishes to have?
Thanks, Kate. And it's a great question because I think there's 2 parts of this. The first is obvious, and I think the first everyone is addressing, and the second one is a little less obvious, we don't think about as much. So the first is, what can colleges do, what can universities do from an outreach perspective or a recruitment perspective? And that's that when we look at the ruling from the Supreme Court, it doesn't necessarily say you can't outreach or you can't recruit a diverse student body. It's that those criteria, those elements, they can't go into the admission process. So the first thing we did, and we've had a group stood up at College Board for a long time, it was an Access and Diversity Consortium of institutions. And it's been in existence for about 10 years, but at that moment in time last June, when this all came out, it was about how do you survey that group, how do you engage that group, find out what folks are doing. First things they did is, they went back and they retrained their readers and their staff about what they were doing. The overwhelming majority started to think, how do we review applications differently? Others changed questions in their applications. Others revisited certain criteria that they put in the application process that would fall into the admissions realm. But they still wanted to outreach to diverse student populations. So it's an interesting lens that you should and always should still be looking to recruit a diverse population of students. There was a lot of fear, though. I think that's what we found right away, is, I can't do anything anymore because of what this legislation did and what the ruling did and everything beyond that. And it was a little bit of that moment of take a moment, think about it, understand what the ruling was, and don't stop trying to recruit diverse student populations. That's one. It's a little obvious to anybody in the room who works in higher ed that was the angle. The second is the student side, that we don't want students to think that it's limiting their ability to go to college or university, and specifically underrepresented student populations in particular who would see that ruling, see what was being said in the press, and see institutions pull back on reaching out to those students. That we certainly didn't want that to happen. And you would encourage schools, universities, colleges, everybody else, make sure that message is out there, that access, college, university, that path to your future is still readily available and not something we're going to abandon in any way, shape, or form. But it's not easy. I can't say it was an easy time or an easy approach.
And how long do you think it's going to take? How many years before we see what the fallout is? A few more? One more?
I don't know. I wish I could tell you. I think it's going to be X, Y, or Z in time frame. But we hope that it's not. We hope that there's still going to be that approach that from everybody up here who's outreaching to students and then focusing on different marketing channels and targeting students. That will continue for the most part. But Kari, you and I talked about this. If
Kari,
it's not equally universal across the country, state by state. There's so many issues that come down to the state level that you talked about. I think that'd be great for everybody here.
Yeah, there's so many layers to the legislation that we don't always think about. So you have the Supreme Court ruling, and then as a state public university, we also had additional guidance from our Tennessee Attorney General. And then the institution general counsel, our system general counsel, has guidance. And many states took an even more conservative approach than the Supreme Court ruling. So we've spent a lot of time working with our general counsel and thinking about what we can and feel like we can and can't do within the breadth of the legislation. So a few things that we are very intentional about doing. And we laid some groundwork before the Supreme Court case, but you can target certain high schools. And so we have what are called flagship high school partners across the state of Tennessee, close to 40 high schools. These are high schools tend to have lowest socioeconomic, lowest college going rates, and highest racial diversity. And we can target specifically these schools. And any student admitted from one of our flagship high schools, we provide a full tuition and fee scholarship. So we back up access, not just from an admission standpoint, but also financial. So you can target specific high schools. You can target geographic. So we have certain counties that we're targeting, focused on distressed counties. Historically distressed counties in Tennessee, they range from about 10 counties to 15, fluctuates a little bit, but we're using that to help us also target students. And then of course you can target based on socioeconomic and also first gen status. So while these are not exact proxies, of course, for racial diversity, it is a way for us to make sure we are maintaining our access mission as a university.
And the free ride helps a lot there. So I know there are probably some people listening saying, darn, that would be super helpful. Unfortunately, not a possibility for many of our private schools. All right, David, I'm going to go to you with this one. Yield rates. So students are lobbying tons of applications. And just want to see from your perspective how institutions should respond to this, maybe attract fewer prospects, but those that might love your institution the most.
Yeah, I definitely don't think the answer is fewer prospects.
Yeah.
Definitionally, as students apply to more and more schools, the yield's going to come down overall for the sector, and so therefore, just maintaining the yields that our partners have today is going to be increasingly challenging, and it has been increasingly challenging. I think I saw the yield rates are down, cut in half over the last 10 years or so. We focus on a few things around the yield. One is yield should not start at admit. Yield should start when you're engaging the student. That should be before application. How are you engaging the student? How are you nurturing the student? How are you making sure that when the time comes for that student to be thinking of which school they want to go to amongst the many choices they have, that you're going to stick out? And so really making sure that you're not thinking of yield as being a March thing, but it really starts as soon as you're starting to engage with that student. The second one is obviously you only have so many less scalable resources, and so we spend a lot of time with predictive analytics. We have a product called Yield IQ that basically has taken a look at about 100 different data sets to try and figure out which ones are most predictive of a student likely yielding to the school. What we found is that there's 15 of those data sets that give you about 80% of the predictive value of whether that person is likely to yield. What that allows you to do is then kind of segment your admitted students or even pre-admitted students into kind of ones most likely to admit, so therefore you can maybe focus your counselors on those least likely to admit, which certainly you don't want to ignore, but maybe you're putting in more scalable nurture campaigns and those things in between. So making sure that you're able to figure out, in a day and age when people are going to most likely get more and more applications, where you're focusing your resources.
So you can't treat all those applications the same. And the resources don't allow it. Yeah.
Certainly none of the partners that
Yeah.
we work with. I mean, and the resources, the people in Kari's role should be getting hazard pay right now in terms of VPs of enrollment. There's not a harder job
Agree.
out there anywhere, and certainly resources are scarce and only going to become more scarce, and so making sure where you're spending those scarce resources is hugely important.
David, you said something too, as we've talked, asking students and checking in with them, asking students directly, what are your plans? And for some reason, as higher ed institutions, we haven't always done that well. We've actually started doing that at UT, these what we call pulse surveys, where we text students and they're just really short, checking in. Have you made your final decision? What can we do to help? Have you made other plans? And that way we can kind of honor that and maybe pull back on communication to that group of students and really focus in on the students who are still on the fence, and then not taking for granted the students who said, I'm all in, I'm going to come your way.
It's kind of funny, it's very sensible questions. Sometimes we just don't ask them. What's your response rate, Kari? Just curious when you ask that question.
Response rate, I've got our data analytics folks right here in the front. Scott, do you remember what our response rate was on the Pulse? 87%.
remarkable. All right.
Yeah, and we're also pulsing, I know many institutions maintain a wait list, and we're pulsing our wait list to check in with students as well, just to say, hey, do you still want to maintain on the wait list, or have you made other plans? And that's been remarkably helpful in terms of continuing to measure what we're calling continued interest. And then when we go to our wait list, we know kind of our hottest leads to work from first.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so the young are still RSVPing. I feel like nobody else does. No, that's great. Good to hear. All right, Matt, list buys. We love our lists.
Licensing? We say name license.
But state privacy concerns, I know that that's forefront with you all at the College Board. Can you tell us what we should expect? Obviously, a double whammy with the decreasing pool of prospects.
This is the topic that I think gets most focused from our side at College Board and BigFuture. BigFuture being a part of where we really engage with students in the college selection process and the education process and the financing process. You'll hear those terms a lot of College Board and BigFuture when we're engaging this. But the narrative that you hear a lot of is that something like the student names are going away, right? There's no way to engage students in the traditional means that we've had for a very long time, which is the student search service. So students who can opt in, coming out of assessments, to connect with colleges and be available. That's not actually going away. It's still extremely strong in terms of what we've seen from the participation of students. There's still over 6 million students who are opted in to search for us. We've added 350,000 just in the first quarter of this year of students who are still participating in this. So the students are still there and still want to participate in that. However, at the same time, at College Board, I think one of my colleagues put this great, we're looking around the corner, right? We're always trying to stay ahead of what's going on from national trends, from what we're seeing from legislation. And what we know there is privacy legislation at the state level has started to limit the way that data is being transferred or stored from students. Now, College Board made the huge move just this past year to do in-school assessments digitally and put a huge investment in that to do digital assessments, which opened up a world of privacy legislation that we didn't have at our doorstep before. I think this is great for many reasons. One, we're protecting student data and we're thinking about privacy. That is a good thing. Problem is you can't access students, you can't connect with students the way that you maybe historically always had. So higher education, who in this room actually works in higher education, colleges, and universities? It's a decent number. Please don't take this as offense, you may agree with it. Not always open to fast change, right? As an industry, it's not something we embrace as an industry. So at College Board, when we did this, we said, okay, well, we'll have privacy forward be what we're going to move towards, and created an app, the BigFuture School app, where students could move from assessment to check their scores through a mobile device, which is, has anyone walked around this conference for the last few days? Has anyone seen everybody face down in their phones? We're not even the demographic we're talking about here of reaching students. So we needed to do that mobile-first, privacy-forward approach to reaching students. And that's what we did through creating Connections, which is a privacy-forward way that students can engage with colleges when they're ready, when they want to give their data over in a new way. Now, it's hard. If you're in admissions and you have always relied on licensing names, And now you're being told that there's a whole new process to this, and we're thinking about the data, and we're thinking about the privacy, and there's a new app that does this, and a new communication channel. That can be overwhelming. And I respect from the higher ed side, we heard this, and I'm pretty open about it. Colleges and universities saying, why are you doing this to us? Right? And I say that openly because we're not doing it to you. We're getting out ahead of what we see happening in the industry. We're putting some power in the students' hands, and we're allowing them to engage at the right points. Right? When a student checks their score in the BigFuture school app, they're thinking about their future, and they're starting to ask the question, okay, what's next for me? What do I think about on the next piece on my path? So I think it's a very interesting time that people are a little, again, afraid of it because it's new and it's different. It does cause change. It does cause a new way. But it's very thoughtful and responsive to what we see happening on the legislative side, on the student side, on the technology side, and kind of embrace it in that way. Yeah.
Who's making that decision to opt in? Is it the student or the parent?
It's the student.
It's the
Still when
student, yeah.
comes through. Yep. And so we have a process by which when the student signs up and they can opt in, and it's all in the student's control too. I
Yeah.
want to say that's very clear about this, that it's not the parent saying it, it's not the school district
Yep.
saying it, it's the student can choose to provide a mobile number, the student can choose to opt into connections through the app. They choose what to do with this. And I love that empowerment of students
Yeah.
in many ways.
And how long have you guys been testing that? Like, what are you seeing in terms of percentages opting in? I'm just curious.
That we actually see the percentages opting into BigFuture School and Connections higher than students opting into Student Search Service historically. So you have
Okay.
more students embracing this mobile delivery system, this mobile environment. And the number now, we've only started doing this in the fall. So we did this through the PN assessments that were done in the fall. We're doing it now with the SAT digitally in the spring in schools. We are just shy of 2 million students who have actively gone through, taken the assessment, and opted fully into Connections. Now we're talking about reach differently. There's still 6 million students in Student Search Service, 2 million students almost in Connections. All of these different ways of thinking about the reach of those students is still very strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Don, I want to move to you here. So we think about recruiting and enrollment as this moment of time, and we just throw, I still say we, having come from an institution, tons of money at it, right? And then the second they're there, you know, the investment goes down, the focus goes down. Don, just want to talk to you about, you know, how do you all at PeopleGrove think about the mindset around that strict line that we have there, and should it be a bit more blurry, frankly?
Yeah, I think going to comment David made about looking at industry and what can we learn from industry and bring into higher education. No other industry would be okay with losing 40% of their customers every year, and yet we are. And I think, you know, Tennessee's done an amazing job. Kari's telling me, you know, retention over 90%. It is not a foregone conclusion that you will have to lose all of those students. I think there's absolutely things we can do to make sure that students retain at institutions. And it's really, as we were talking ahead of the session, it's a win-win. It's good for the institution, it's good for revenue, but more importantly, it's good for the student. When they're not transferring, when they're not losing credits, when they stay on a path that gets them to the point of success for them, everyone wins. And so we should be thinking more around re-enrollment every day. What are we doing to re-enroll this student, to reconfirm that this was the right choice for them, to make sure that they have the right resources and path to get to where they want to be from a picture of success, whatever that looks like for them. And so I think a lot of this comes to even the title of this, you know, looking at personalization and enrollment. We need to look at personalization at scale with our existing students as well. How can we leverage AI to do things better, faster, or more inexpensively for them? And so there's a lot of resources at our disposal that we have now that we didn't even have 3 years ago to make sure that every student feels supported and gets the resources they need to stay in school and to graduate and get the postgraduate outcomes they're looking for. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and we shouldn't just stop at enrollment and tailoring this to enrollment. We really need to think about this from a student perspective and then even into the alumni space as well.
So, I mean, you would view career pathing, is that a word, as a sticky, something to keep them sticky with their institution. Tell me more about that versus mentoring. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of what is appealing to the students the most?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the research, students and parents are making decisions based on outcomes. If I invest this much here, what will I get from this? And so to overlook the impact of postgraduate outcomes would be a huge miss. And it's, again, not just having a career center. I used to manage a career center a long time ago, and it was not the highly resourced career center that I think students need and expect. I'm sure none of your institutions are like that. It was just mine. But we have, I think today, so many more resources that we can plug into being able to connect students and support them one-to-one, whether that's through resume writing that's now done. You don't have to sit down with someone one-to-one. You can do this through AI templates. I mean, you don't need, it doesn't require the same resources it did before from a human perspective to be able to provide even better support in some cases, one-to-one for those students. So I think keeping them on a purpose-driven path towards whatever it might be, grad school, it might be med school, it could be the specific job they're looking for, area they want to be in, industry-wise, but connecting that to the work they're doing. And we do a lot of work with experiential learning as well, embedded in the classrooms. When we can have students that are connecting with employers, we bring them. They're in a marketing class. We just had this a couple weeks ago. Chapstick came to us and said, we want to make chapstick sexy again. The brand Chapstick, and they wanted to get with an HSI. They wanted to target this to a Hispanic population of 18 to 22, and so we got them with the marketing classes at an HSI institution. Those students are getting great resume. They have so much experience they can put on their resume. Meanwhile, Chapstick is looking for talent, and so this becomes a talent pipeline for them as well. And so those are the types of things that I think energize students, keep them in school, and also prepare them for life afterwards. So they're not just leaving with a degree; they're leaving with a comprehensive co-curricular transcript that gets them the job or into med school or into grad school that they're looking for.
And yeah, I mean, great way to create affinity.
Absolutely.
Who knew
Well, I have two questions. Like, when was chapstick sexy? There's maybe
I
question
know,
number one.
right?
Not a bad thing. I love it, but I'm like,
sexy in the
sexy is not
70s.
the word I would
Young
use.
to
for it.
remember.
The second was more for the panel. You kind of hit on this, Don, when you talk about career placement and career services and thinking about postgraduate career outcomes, even in the admissions and the application process. But even I watched a panel discussion yesterday, and this has been the ongoing challenge for, I think, Kari, your team and others, is all students are applying to these very competitive majors. And you look at computer science, you look at engineering, you look at business, and the liberal arts continues to go in the decline in terms of interest areas. How do you even deal with that on the application side, on the admission side, when it becomes a much more different world to talk about those? And I don't think higher education has historically done a great job talking about the post-career outcomes of a liberal arts major in the same way and trying to shift that. I'm a liberal arts major. I never visited the career services office. Nobody's ever told that story or talks about it. I'm just curious how that's evolved for you lately, and not to put you on the spot, Kari, but for anybody here of what that looks like.
Yeah, I may be alone in this thinking in the higher ed world, but I think it is absolutely crazy that we ask students at 16, 17, 18 years old to choose what they want to be for life. So we do, one of the things I'm proud of and we talk about a lot at UT is that we do offer a comprehensive educational experience, and students can come and discover their passions and figure out what areas they want to pursue. And Don and I were talking before the session, and you talked about your heart being set on being an accountant until you took that first day, right?
Yes.
First day.
First day, it was not for me.
Yeah. And so we have to be prepared to help students and be flexible enough to help students who want to change and explore and who may not know exactly where they're meant to be. So that's a piece of thing, and technology can help us do that in ways that traditionally we probably haven't done well. The other piece I'll come back to that really relates to the value proposition is, it was a bad word to think of students as customers, like even just a few years ago. And I know it ruffles faculty feathers sometimes. And now we're not even talking about students as customers, but rather as shareholders or investors in their experience. They want to have a role in shaping their experience. And it may not be the straight path that we've designed for them. So as universities, our challenge is, again, coming back to being way more flexible in how we deliver on the experience. Technology is going to play a giant role in that going forward. And then the career services side can't be underscored enough. They need to be engaging and experimenting with internships and engaging with alumni. Like, I love this idea of leveraging our alumni communities to help students figure out what they're meant to do and what they're passionate about.
Yeah, I think EAB is the largest provider of student success technologies out there. Retention is not a foregone conclusion in terms of if it's a lower rate. Organizations are moving the dial. It takes technology, it takes resources, it takes staffing, it takes commitment, it takes doing some things that some people around the university aren't going to like. but there's a real way to change retention, which is what we're all about in terms of the mission of all of our organizations, but also from an increasingly economic and challenging environment. It's also great for the institution's bottom line in terms of retaining those students. As you said, no other business out there would be okay with losing 40% of their clients each year.
Yeah, it's good to see the defeatism around that kind of ending. And also, hate to leave these students with debt. So it's definitely an ethical issue there as well. Okay, last question. Want to keep it real here. A lot of this stuff that we've been talking about costs money, right? Advertising dollars, digital ads are out of control, list buys, vendor partner support we have down here at the far side. What if you're an institution with a limited marketing budget? Like, what do you all recommend? And that's the type of institution that I came from, to really triage your dollars and your effort. Kari, I'll start with you.
Well, I guess I would start with saying enrollment's a team sport, and so it takes a campus-wide culture to do it well, and especially when you're thinking about retention efforts. So there is a whole variety of things that we do that cost little to nothing. And one is creating a customer service language, again, looking to industry and kind of stealing ideas. So any fans of Chick-fil-A in the room?
Oh, yeah.
Living in the South, I mean, Chick-fil-A is like a religion. They have a customer service language, and we've borrowed some of their ideas. They say, "My pleasure." When you call any of our units in enrollment management, including our one-stop centralized service center, we answer the phone. "It's a great day on Rocky Top. Thank you for calling the University of Tennessee." We try to do the little things that cost nothing really well that, again, differentiate and define the UT experience at every touch point. We also still do print, old school, traditional, but you have to be selective about what you're sending, because postage rates, anybody who's worked in marketing or in outreach efforts, postal rates are insane. And so you have to think differently. Okay, what is the purpose of this? Who's the audience? What's the touch point? And then creating that experience. Gone are the days of the windowed envelope or the boring letter. It's got to be something meaningful for students and families.
Catching their eye, making them look, right. David, what do you recommend?
First of all, an organization, I think, has to be realistic on their goals, which is the overall sector demographics are against us in terms of the number of students that are college going. And so therefore, if resources are tight, you've got to also be realistic on those goals and what you can accomplish, because unfortunately it does take resources to meet larger goals. The two most cost-effective ways that at least I point our partners to at first, one is their own websites. A huge number of students, college websites are where they get a lot of their information, and yet most college websites are terrible. And so how do you make sure that the college website is optimized for search so that when someone's looking for information, they come to you where you've curated the response? How do you make sure they have robust virtual tours that are engaging, that make your university come to life? How do you make sure the website overall makes your university come to life? How do you make sure that it's focusing students so that hopefully you're getting kind of inquiries out of it so that you can actually continue to engage with that student going forward? That would be number one. Number two is, if you only have so many dollars, email marketing is the most cost-effective way to go. Any other sector out there would kill to know exactly who you want to be marketing to, what segment. If someone's between the ages of 15 and 18 and in high school, they're a pretty good prospect for us. And in most cases, we, at least historically, have had their email addresses and been able to market to them. And so therefore, being able to market to them in a personalized way, being able to market to them as inboxes is pretty darn effective, especially as postage rates continue to go up. College boards made it more difficult. They're not trying to. They're doing being responsive to the market as they see it, but making sure that there continue to be ways for people to have list sources, for people to do that in a cost-constrained environment. We've got to make sure that our partners continue to be able to find ways to efficiently market, and email marketing is one of the most efficient.
What are you seeing? I'm just curious, opening rates over the past few years, because all I hear is, the essentially teenagers, we're talking about traditional four-year students here, aren't looking at email.
Yeah, our response rates, the places where we've measured it the most is what we call our Cultivate campaigns, which would be to freshmen and sophomores and to juniors. Over the last year, our rates are up 20%.
Wow.
And it's by doing those things that we talk about, I talked about earlier, in terms of being hyper-personalized, in terms of also they're seeing it from multi-channel, so it's not just email where they're getting it. But as a result, the responsive rates we've seen have been very attractive. I think the idea that email is dead, certainly it's one of many things, but again, it's the most cost-effective. It's very expensive to do search market, to have search ads or other social media, and it's in a much more scattershot way as opposed to the specific segmentation you can do around email.
Great. Good tip. Good to know. Don, what do you recommend?
So I would just echo what you both have said. I think those are great suggestions and ideas, and I would say the same thing. I would add to that, make sure the content is the right piece. So you want a multi-channel approach. You need to be in all these places, but if you don't have the right message, it still doesn't matter. And so use research to decide what you're going to talk about, what you lead with. We talked about, we're talking today about hyper-personalization. Know who you're messaging to. Is this someone who's low income, where affordability is the number one thing you need to talk to them about? They might love to hear about how your faculty ratio is low, but if they don't see themselves being able to afford, they're not going to click on that email. So I think use data, use the research to figure out, is this the right message to the right person at the right time? And use all the channels, use the things that make you unique, but also just don't overlook content. Sometimes I think we get so enamored with, we need 3 more emails, or we need a text message, or we need something else. Make sure you're using data to say the right message.
Yeah, it's a great tip. Matt, not everybody hates the College Board. We still like you guys. You're good. You're safe here. Are you wearing your tag or no? Yeah, Matt, what are you all seeing? What would you recommend in terms of the most cost-effective strategies?
I'll give a couple of things to it. Piggyback on what Don said, data and analytics is huge, right? If you're utilizing your CRM, if you're utilizing data to see what's the most effective approach, what channels are most effective, what messages resonate at what time, just getting smarter about that. And I think most institutions have access to data, they just haven't used it to make action or to do something about it, because it's just we're awash in data and it's overwhelming at most times. So trying to utilize data as effectively as possible to find, it's not just finding the right channel, but it's finding the right mix of channels, that those work together, the right messages that go through those, and that can empower small teams to do a lot of very effective things if you're able to do that. The second one I would say is, you probably have a lot of things at your disposal that you may not be even aware of, from tech platforms, from vendors that you work with, and other things along those lines. Use that, or be willing to experiment. I think that that's part of the problem, is most offices, as we know, don't have resources, don't have the people time to experiment, and then see how those experiments are. So make sure you don't take experimentation off the table, and being willing to try new things to see how they work out, and then using the data, again, to see what was the most effective one, and then recreate the cycle again. Start over and continue to experiment. I would love higher ed to continue to embrace that experimentation and innovation mindset in the admissions process, but some will just say, well, this is what works and this is what we're going to keep doing because it's the thing we can do as easily as possible. So building in within your resources some of that time for experimentation has to still be a part of this if we're ever going to really drive ahead with the resources we have.
That makes great sense. I mean, we're at the end, and I can't help but think about the theme of this conference. I see AI on like half of the panels. And David, I think you had a really good point that over-reliance on AI might make everyone seem like a commodity, frankly. So it will be very interesting to see how this evolves and how we're talking about AI in a few years at this conference. But for now, I really appreciate the very down-to-earth, not all technology-based, person-to-person recommendations you guys gave. So thank you, and good luck to all of you.